Timer's going. Onnit podcast. Rob Wilson in the house.
What's up, brother? Thanks for having me.
Fuck yeah. It's an absolute pleasure. I got to admit, I was a little, I don't know how this works. There we go. Now I know how this works. I'm trying to come up with the analogy. So we were just talking about Paul Chek. I did his holistic life coach level 1 back in the day. And for whatever reason, I thought he'd be at the entry level course. So when I showed up and he wasn't teaching it and it was a first timer, I was like, fuck, man, I got the rookie here, you know? But that's one of his, that's his second wife, Angie. And Angie Lustrick is phenomenal. So like after like an hour into it, I'm like, oh, she's fucking amazing. Like totally worth it, you know? And so when I wanted Art of Breath to come here, I thought Mackenzie was going to be here with other guys. So like, it was like, dope, man, I'll get him on the show. And then of course he's like, no, I'm not coming out, but you got Rob Wilson. And I was like, all right. And I think I've seen you on the Art of Breath or Power Speed Endurance doing some different things on that website, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So then I was like, all right, having experience with that, with not getting the creator, it was like maybe Rob will be a cool guy. And you've been fucking awesome, man. It's been great to spend the last 2 days with you.
Thank you very much. I'm stoked to be out here. I've wanted to come out to Onnit for a long time, so it's a bucket list item for me. Just to be clear, though, I am the co-founder.
Yeah. So you're not the underling.
No, but I mean, Brian, of course, has been in the human performance game a long time, and that's something that we sort of have to. That you get a lot, right? Because his name is so pervasive in the human performance community because all the work that he's done. And mine's not. It's just this, I just haven't done as much work yet. Like I don't have as high a volume of creation out there. But one thing that I really appreciate about people like Brian is that he doesn't make the work about him. So it's not like the Brian McKenzie show at all. He's totally about the work and making sure that it's about people getting the information in the best way possible, whether he's present in body at the seminar or not. And so, in order to scale anything, you have to start handing off. And even like yesterday, I didn't teach the entire course. I have guys who are teaching with me, and in order for anything to grow, you have to be willing to, and scale, you have to be willing to say, like, hey, there's good people here. And not only are they capable of teaching what, we created, but also like these guys have their own valuable input that can make all of us better, right? Because no single human being has it all figured out. But if you can create a really good team like you guys have here, right? So that's the feeling you get when you come around here. It's not like walking around today and talking to people. It's not you're the host of the show, but the whole thing, it's not like the Kyle show, right? It's like, hey, this guy has his unique contribution and we've learned a lot about this. And that's the sense that you get when you come here, is that it's about learning and growing and then taking that information and distributing it out to people, right? Total human optimization, like in saying, hey, this is what we've learned. Take what you can from that. Not, hey, let's create a guru, right? Because what happens when that person goes away, if they don't want to do it anymore? What happens if they die? The market changes. So you have to, over time, have a way to scale that information and make the actual body of knowledge alive and important on its own, and not make it about a singular person or individual.
That's truly, that's something, again, Paul Chek talks about as like, what legacy will you leave? And as you build a system that can live on past yourself, your name, your competence, and also your ability to reach the masses, right? Like whoever the person is can only be in one place at one time, right? So to scale to the masses, you have to teach a system that can be translated to other coaches and people. And ultimately that system can live online, it can live in person, it can live in many different forms. And then that reaches far more people and helps far more people when you construct it that way.
I agree. And sometimes I think some people can become, and even myself, like you can become cynical, like can be a tendency for some to be a little cynical, like, oh, things might get diluted. But I prefer to think of it as distillation, right? So I enjoy the challenge of, okay, well, if I have to communicate this to a broad set of individuals, then it challenges me as an educator, teacher, provider to distill information down to its most basic and true components, and to be able to communicate those across a broad set of interests, personality types. So, you know, if you're trying to make what you're teaching universal and scalable, then you have to boil it down to principles, which requires from an individual, like a creator or a teacher, to truly understand what they're talking about from a most basic component level. And everybody knows, no matter what you do, the key to mastery is fundamentals, right? So the understanding those fundamental components makes it easier to transmit across lots of different types of populations.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. There's something, I love distillation as a term, because I was just talking to Aubrey about this. The greatest masters in anything dumb it down. You know, they make it so available. John Dudley was just here, one of the best archers in the world, Joe Rogan's coach, hooked me up with a bow for my birthday and gave me like 48 hours of private lessons. That's rad. I was like, man, you fucking make it so simple. Cause it's like a golf swing. I've never shot a bow. We were talking about bow hunting, and he tries to break it down into just 5 easy steps, 5 easy, simple steps that you can remember. And you just go through sequentially all the way up from your feet to your jaw to the finish. Right. And so it's like, and it doesn't matter who it is, like, you know, like Wim Hof, like somebody we'll talk about on this show today. Take all the dogma, take all the bullshit, take everything that's unnecessary out of that, and just leave them with something that's usable.
Totally.
You know, there's no doubt that that's what true mastery is.
Totally. And look at, so, you know, Kelly Starrett is a mentor of mine, and, you know, you look at like the mobility wad, and, you know, sometimes, of course, once you are as successful as he is, immediately that levies tremendous criticism from people who have not done anything. Right? And
there's no shortage of trolls.
There's no shortage of trolls, right? And so they sort of pick on the nuances of some of his contributions. But I say he took these incredibly, like, the complicated idea of human movement, biomechanics, and kinematics, all this force trajectory and all this stuff, and boiled it down into archetypes that are easy to understand. Hey, here's a shape. Can you make this shape? If you can't make this shape, here's how to change it so you can, right? And that makes it, you know, so usable for so many types of people. If you're an elite athlete, that can make sense to you. If you're a movement teacher, it doesn't matter if you're teaching advanced yoga, there's still certain shapes that your body has to pass through. It won't really matter. It sort of distills it down. And that is a very, very hard thing to do. It's easy to make something sound complicated. You know, what's that Einstein quote? If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it. Right. And I always really like that. And to also like balance that out, of course, Einstein also said, make something as simple as possible, but not any simpler. So to boil it again, to distill something down to its simplest components, but also not ignore the fact that there are some complexities, right? But yeah, for me, the focus especially the last year has been on communication, right? And it's especially with the volume and speed that we can get new information, it becomes really easy to get addicted to, well, I've done so much, I've done this research, I've read all this stuff, right? And then to realize when you go to actually communicate with most people, they're not interested in you proving your depth of knowledge to them, right? That person is living their own life, and they're also being bombarded by information, and they just want to leave the conversation with a usable concept that they can practically and pragmatically integrate into their life right now, right? And the heart of that, if you're a teacher, is communication, right? And so being able to really hone the capacity to speak in concise and direct ways that make sense to people quickly so that they can get buy-in, and then they'll actually use the thing. Like, because I could talk about all day, like the research data around breath work and how important it is and how many cultures, blah, 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 blah. But if it seems too complex for like a stay-at-home mom who does yoga in her living room to use, doesn't even matter. She's not going to do it. She'll be like, oh, neat. And then they'll never actually engage in the practice. So the idea is communicate the importance and then make a usable tool so that the person will engage, you know. So eventually everything boils down to engage. And that's why, you know, we end the day out in the Art of Breath seminar with basically 2.5 hours of trials, because talk is talk, right? Like, okay, let's put this stuff to work. Let's see how you guys will actually use it, feel it for yourself. And that is what really creates buy-in for people. Like, oh, okay, well, when I do the thing that I care about, this makes me feel different. All right, I'm in. Now I'm in.
Yeah.
Now I'll use it.
That's something I loved about Wim Hof. One of his great quotes is feeling is believing, right? When you feel that change in neurochemistry and your body's charged up, there's no fucking doubt it worked. You don't have to ask somebody else, like, am I doing it right? Like, am I supposed to, like, no, this is like, you feel fucking charged. You're lit. Brain chemistry's changed. Focus is enhanced. Or you relax, you know, you hit the modality for calm, and you're able to fucking bring that heart rate way down post-workout after you just crushed yourself on an Airdyne or a ski erg, whatever you've done. There's different applications for that. And I want to jump into that for sure, but I also want to backtrack because I know we've made our way into this podcast, and I'd like to get the origin story.
Okay.
So
All right.
I want to see, like, how'd you know, you talked about being with Kelly for some time and training with him and working with him. But really, like, let's talk about the whole kit and caboodle. Where'd you grow up? Fucking athletic background, all that shit.
Yeah, so I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia, which is, you know, like, it's kind of every town USA. When you go there, like, it stays the same. The market never gets super awesome, but it never crashes either, because it's the highest density of military population in the world. So it's a very transient culture. A lot of people are in and out. I moved there when I was like maybe 6. My parents are both retired police officers. So I grew up in a house with a lot of cops around. So I have a really sick sense of humor, because if you want to meet people with like the most inappropriate sense of humor ever, it's police officers, no doubt. But my sports background is actually primarily martial arts. I started when I was about 6 or 7 with judo, and I did judo from that time until I was about 13. In sort of my preteen era is when I found Bruce Lee. And I'm kind of a weirdo, so I'm an incredibly obsessive person. And truth be told, I did terrible in school most of the time because I was largely uninspired, but I'm a big time like autodidact. So if I want to learn about something, I will ferret out every piece of available information about that thing until I feel satisfied with my knowledge level, which is almost never. But I became really obsessed with not just sort of the practical applications of the martial arts, but also like the philosophical origins of the martial arts. So I've been tremendously influenced by Zen Buddhism and Taoism especially. And I've been reading that stuff probably since I was 12 or 13.
Give me some books. What are like your favorite books with Zen Buddhism and Taoism?
I really like the old stuff, like the Tao Te Ching. Like I like it because it boils it down to observing nature. And then, you know, I mean, there's some like D.T. Suzuki books, sort of, and Alan Watts is one of my.
He's incredible.
He's all time. But what's interesting is in the West we tend to intellectualize. So, you know, you have a system of thinking that's about not thinking or not intellectualizing. And then you have somebody really brilliant like Alan Watts, who intellectualized Buddhism because he came from the culture of intellectualization and he wanted to make it accessible for people who are Westerners, right? But what I like about the Tao Te Ching is it's like slow water cuts rock. And you have to think about that. Like, what does that mean, right? When you think about something like as amazing geographically as the Grand Canyon, that was carved out by water. You know, this is something I said to my daughter the other day because we were talking about working hard for a long time. It doesn't happen in a day. Slow water cuts rock, right? And it's just this sort of slow over time, staying repetitive, you know. So those really old sayings, I mean, there's Zen and the Art of Archery is another one that's unbelievable, which is also like a Westerner's introduction into Zen practice and how, you know, to reconcile intellectualization with the act of just doing, right? In our culture, we tend to intellectualize. There's a guy actually at the seminar on Sunday, not to drift too far from the origin story, but who was asking me a question about sort of like, what are the physiological mechanisms around how cold therapy works and all, you know, how does this relate to the breath work? And as we're talking, you know, if you do this long enough and you really pay attention to people, you get a sense of, is their question coming from a place of experience or is it just a bubble in their head? And very nice guy, did a great job at the seminar. I was super interested in what we were doing, but I just asked him, how much experience do you have with that work? And he said, well, I did I've done, and it was kind of a stutter like that. And I was like, no.
I've taken a cold shower before.
Yes. Right. It was something in the order of that. And I said, before you ask these questions, do the thing. Try it. Go through the process. Engage yourself. Make yourself vulnerable to the process. Some of these questions will just answer themselves. You'll figure it out. How do you think other people have the answer? The reason I personally know about cold work and sort of the nuances is because I completely made myself vulnerable to the practice for a year and did all kinds of weird stuff with it in different scenarios and messed up. I've had tremendous failures with all kinds of training programs and stuff. And that's how you learn things, right? You try things out and then you fail. And then for me, I'll research why, because I'm a teacher. But that was sort of the point, is like, and that's what I like about Eastern is it's direct. Like I don't need an intermediary necessarily all the time, that I need to have a direct experience of something. And that a true teacher is just a guide towards a direct experience, not somebody who, you know, hands you a worksheet.
Yeah.
You know?
Eckhart Tolle talks about that. Like these are all pointers towards the truth, towards God, Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it, right? Towards self-realization.
Exactly.
And that in and of itself is not the thing. And they talk about that in the Tao Te Ching, like the world of 10,000 things. We can have a description of that thing, but whatever that thing is unknowable. It's unspeakable. You can't put language around it.
Yeah. It's like, so you have kids, trying to explain to somebody who doesn't have children what it's like to be a father. It's impossible. Like the joy that comes from watching a human being go from completely vulnerable into their own like thinking, acting, they're creating their own idea of the world. It's an amazing process to be a part of. And
the hardest, most difficult thing on earth.
Yeah.
You know, all rolled into one.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to really learn about how to be a teacher, have kids.
That's one of the coolest things too that I've seen is it's like this beautiful yin yang of teacher student. You know, like my son is my greatest teacher. Like I've been learning constantly through the last 3 years how to teach in a more gentle way, you know, and like there's a way to orchestrate language and reaction that has made me a better person.
Yeah.
And he's a great teacher in that, like, he doesn't respond to spanking. He doesn't respond to any, you know what I'm saying? So It's like, oh, these old things that I was accustomed to, they're no longer valuable.
Yeah.
Like there's a different way.
Yeah. Or even if it was viable at the time, do we have a better solution? Right. So like, you know, I think sometimes when we look at any old tradition, we tend to think one trap can be like, that was bad, or we can create a negative connotation. But just to say, well, this is the best solution that this group of individuals had available to them, either through their own training experience or through just their life, like the life and culture they were in, right? And then to go, okay, well, just because that was the solution for them at that time, does that mean it's the best one for me in this situation now? Sometimes the answer is yes. There are some things some ways that like my mom, I was raised by my mom, and there are some things that she did where I'm like, yes, I agree with that 100%. And that helped shape me in an important way. And there are some things I go, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to address this with my child a little differently. Right. And it doesn't mean her way was bad. It means she used the tools she had available to shape me, and I'm going to use the tools and that's what should happen. That's what any parent would hope for. Like when and if my daughter has children, I would hope she would learn from some things that she didn't like or didn't work for her from how I raised her, and then improve, because that's evolution.
Yeah, every
right?
generation should exceed the previous.
Exactly.
In how they teach, how they learn, all that stuff.
Yeah. So really interesting. But anyway, I segued way off topic there, way off your question. So yeah, I grew up doing martial arts. I did judo until I was about 13. And then I got really, really interested in the Jeet Kune Do concepts of Bruce Lee. And I was super fortunate because one of Dan Inosanto's students, so if anybody's familiar with Dan Inosanto, he's like an OG in martial arts. I mean, he's in his 70s now. I think he's in his late 70s, still studies with Jean-Jacques Machado. He's one of Bruce Lee's only students. Like when Bruce died, he's like a legit Sifu of the Jeet Kune Do concepts. He's got multiple black belts. He studied Muay Thai under Sirachai Sursut when he first came to the States. He's got deep knowledge. And one of his students, Frank Cucci, who owns Lynx Academy in Virginia Beach, Virginia, retired military guy, had a school open up like right around the inception of UFC 1. So 94, I was 13. And they offered Jeet Kune Do concepts, but it was sort of under the banner of Muay Thai. We did Mafalindo Silat and Kali, and then the Junfan Kung Fu. And then he would mix in all kinds of other stuff. And it was kind of neat because I saw like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu start to creep into the culture at that time. And actually, Frank, I remember him getting his blue belt from Pedro Sauer and it being like, whoa, like there weren't blue belts around back then, you know? And so just as I was in my mid-teens, we started doing more grappling. But in any case, I was there from about 13 to 19. And that was a really formative experience. My dad wasn't really around. And retrospectively, I realized that my mom put me there with some badass dudes, like hardcore. There was like a lot of special warfare guys training there, really nice people, but she wanted me to be around some like strong male figures. And that really shaped me as a person, toughened me up for sure. Like being exposed to like legit Muay Thai training, especially, just sort of gives you a base of like, you might feel like you're going to die right now, but you're not actually going to die.
And it ain't point karate. That's one of the biggest differences when you think of all traditional martial arts and then you think of how Muay Thai fits in that equation.
It's a different animal.
There's no fucking doubt. Like you're tested.
It's not far from its roots of warfare. You know, some martial arts have like their sport application has drifted quite far. I mean, you have some systems like I think Roshinkan and full contact and stuff keep some of that sort of edge. But Muay Thai has like when you're doing it, you realize that the purpose of the blow the blow is to inflict damage on the other person. There's no like, I'm touching for a point. It's like you drive your shin into the leg and you try to break it, like, and kicking the banana bag and doing like practicing cut kicks and like trying to like thinking about that, like someone's leg wrapping around your shin, like the banana bag wraps around your shin. And, but also knowing like I said this to somebody recently, like one of the really cool things about martial arts, and I think one of the things that humbles you is that not only do you realize like you have this power, but you also realize you can get gotten.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very humbling.
It's a two-way street. Like I get you, you can get me. And that can happen with anybody. And you might not be able to judge that by how somebody looks. And that, okay, now I realize that there's this two-way street in the world and I have to respect it. And if not, it will make me. Right. And so I really enjoyed that. And then the instruction there was excellent. So I was exposed to really incredible teachers all through that time. And I had the really great experience to learn directly from Master Chai several times over the course of my teen years and like go to seminars with Dan Inosanto. I had no idea how lucky I was. I appreciate my mom so much. It's like, yes, she would say yes to everything, you know? So she'd be like, yeah, you want to go that somewhere else? Do it. She would just want to put me in that environment. And it was really cool because even as a young teen, those martial arts weren't popular enough to have kids classes yet. So I was like 13 with like guys like us, like guys in their 30s who were in good shape, just got out of the military, tough dudes. They were good to me, but also not afraid. I mean, when I was 13, I was 5'9". So like also letting me know. So it was a really good formative experience. And then all through that time too, I surfed. I was really into water sports. I lifted. My parents were competitive athletes, you know, so my stepdad and my mom were both into self-defense. Actually, both my parents teach self-defense and defensive tactics to law enforcement for a living. So I've been in that sort of environment for a long time and around a lot of people who are not teachers like in a scholastic sense, but that's at like the core of their being, like sharing information for the improvement of another individual. So I've been around a lot of really, really good teachers. And that had some good and bad. I would seek out good teachers as I grew up and got older. But I would also recognize poor ones, you know? So when I was in school, if somebody who was in an academic environment wasn't truly engaged, I could recognize it. And this is only retrospectively, I realized this, but if somebody wasn't really engaged with me and I realized they were just there to punch a clock, forget it. I'm not interested in your class. I'm not doing this work. And as a result, unfortunately, I didn't do very well. In middle school, high school, I was like average-ish student, you know.
You
but
got D pluses and C minuses quite a bit in high school.
Yeah, if it's something I was interested in, I could get an A. You know, like I took Russian language all through high school and then into college a little bit too, and I did very well because not only was it an interesting subject, but the teacher was so excited to be there and to share what she knew that it made us excited to be there and to learn it. And as a result, everybody in class did pretty well on average, you know, way better than like the average Spanish student was doing because they were just taking it because whatever, they needed that credit, right? So being around really good teachers has always been really important. And then I kind of bumped into Kelly by accident. I'm a massage therapist by trade, so I went to massage therapy school. Actually, I'm a college dropout. So I went to college for a while and I was like, I don't fit in academia. The way my mind works is I like to explore what I'm interested in. I think that's probably more common for young men. Like our minds just want to be more exploratory, you know, and I hope that doesn't sound misogynist. I'm speaking from my own experience, right? But I just wanted to explore what I wanted to explore. And I'd always been interested in health and wellness. And I was studying international business and foreign language. And I was like, this job is going to lead to me wearing a suit, being at a desk, looking at a computer. And I am not built for that. Like I'm a wild thing and I want to be out moving around and exploring things. And I'm interested in movement. I had been all through high school. I was lifting. Me and my buddies would go to the gym. My buddies would call me up. Hey, I want to get strong. What do we do? So I would take guys to the gym even then. So I wanted to get into the field of health and help people. And actually the Edgar Cayce Center is, if you're familiar with Edgar Cayce and who Edgar Cayce is, so Edgar Cayce Center is about 10 minutes from my house. So
no shit.
Yeah, it's the largest metaphysical library in the world next to the Vatican. So the Vatican's 1, the Edgar Cayce Library is 2.
Wow.
So I started going there and reading and stuff when I was about 16. So I knew about it, knew what was there, knew that there was that sort of metaphysical knowledge and philosophical hub near me. And so I started going there and knew there was a massage therapy school. And I said, screw it, I'm going to give it a whirl. So I was 19, went to massage therapy school, 19 or 20. And I loved it instantly and did like everybody in that field, entry level, you're working at a spa, right? Because it's the way you can make money. And I knew right away, I was like, this isn't the work that I want to be doing in 10 years. But I like manipulation. I still do some manual therapy as part of a practice. You know, so I coach, I do manual therapy, I teach. But that was sort of my introduction to starting to work one-on-one with people and try to explain to them, how does your body work? Why doesn't it feel good? What can you do to help yourself. And that was something that sort of came out of me right away, you know? So it was like people would come in and I could say, okay, here's your 1 hour rub down and like, thanks a lot, see you later. But that's not part of who I am. So I started educating right away. What are some stretches this person can do? And I was known for homework out of the gate. Like I would go photocopy stretches out of books for people and go, all right, the ones I circled, do these 2 or 3 days. Because I just knew if you don't give the power back to the person, you're going to see the same broken person every time they come in.
Plenty of chiropractors that want to see you 3 days a week for the rest of your life, and they're not teaching you how to fix yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you know, it's that old, like, give a man a fish, eats for a day, teach a man a fish, he eats for life. So I would much rather, you know, give the power back to the person. Some people, though, operate from a fear base. They're afraid if they give too much that they won't be able to make a living, which is on some level, that's a legitimate concern, right? Like,
kind of.
How do I,
yeah.
But the long game, the reality there is, if I give, then this person sees, even if you just look at it from an economic level, the person now sees me as a resource and I truly help them and it made an effect. So what's the likelihood that they're going to tell other people, this person really helped me and it changed me? And then it takes longer. So you have to be patient for that to become viable financially. But if you're patient, it's viable for a longer period of time, right? So it starts to have longevity. And then on top of that, it creates a reputation that you truly help people. You gain knowledge. And then what happens? If there's another rung of the ladder, you can step up on it. And that's why I'm not still doing that thing, because I'm truly interested in what's the next step in helping people, right?
Yeah, we just interviewed Dr. Bo Hightower, and you talk about that give. Like he can, I don't want to say he can fix people in 4 treatments, but I mean, on average, it takes 3 or 4 treatments for him to correct something. And there's a lot of homework that goes into that. And ultimately, if you're a professional fighter, you're going to get dinged up. You're going to need to go back to see him. He works out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, with all of Greg Jackson Wink.
Oh, nice.
But he's got people fucking flying in from all over the country. People jump in their car and go spend a week there just to work with this guy. And that's the return on investment, is that people are getting healed, they're getting fixed, and then they're telling everyone they fucking know, like, I got a guy. So people travel from all around to do that, you know. And then you look at a guy like Kelly Starrett. How do we break this down? You still have the super friends where you might need to go get an adjustment, or you might need a massage, or you might need some external help. But what's the most amount of give we can give to you so you know how to go head to toe on your body and correct things that are out of balance?
Yeah, well,
that's power.
And one is based in a lower level of maturity that's based more in, like, that's centered in the ego, right? This is more like how you would see a kid operate, right? A small child, like, how much do I get? What's my next this? And that's okay. If I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just saying that's the reality, right? It comes from a more self-centered point of view. But if you want to mature as a person, as a human being, then the natural step is, how does what I do help a larger scale? So first it's my friends, then it's my family and friends, my close community, larger community. And if you are maturing with your thought process, at least in my view, then those concentric rings of who you're willing to help, that should grow. I'm willing to give out farther because I no longer have the fear that I won't be taken care of. All right. And what my experience has been, and I've certainly had some strong failures, right, where my judgment was poor. But my sense is that, at least for me, it's better to take the risk and give than to stay selfish, because that's a very lonely existence. I would much rather give and not get anything back than not give at all.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's a very poor existence. And I think some of the disappointments that I've had around giving and then not getting back, whether personally, financially, or otherwise, are because I didn't temper my expectations well. And I didn't really predict I had some prediction problems, like if I worked with an athlete or a client or something like that, and I gave them something, and I didn't temper my expectations well. And I mean, unfortunately, that can only come with experience and going, "Ooh, screwed that up. Try again."
Yeah.
You know. So, but for me, there was a point where I felt myself become slightly like the tendency to become jaded by those kinds of experiences. But I just decided, like, I don't want to be miserable. I feel better when I give. I just feel better. And for me, that's just information. You know, I feel it's more part of who I am naturally. And I would rather honor that and like look back in retrospect on a life where I was myself than go, oh, I kept it all. And then, well, I was super lonely and I accomplished nothing.
and leave nothing behind.
Leave nothing behind. What's
Yeah.
my legacy?
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, I guess you can take a cynical view and be like, we're all going to return to dust. I'm like, yeah, but not right now.
Yeah, not right now. And there's a
Not
lot
right
we
now.
can do in between that time till we return wherever we came from.
Yeah. And I
You
mean,
know?
yeah, I mean, even from just like being, even if you want to make it only like about the me, it feels better. It just feels better. I feel better when I teach, when I share. You know, like you and I had a 20-minute session before this where I was just sharing some more in-depth information about how to apply the breath
Give me
practices.
the fucking cutting edge shit that couldn't be taught at Art of Breath.
I broke it.
It was the top tier.
I broke some stuff down, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't like, in my mind, I wasn't like 21 minutes. What's the dollar value? You know what I mean? Because who cares, right? Me having an opportunity to share with you, I mean, that sharpens my blade as a teacher, right? So just like, okay, well, here's a person that I've never worked with before. We have this block of time. So I'd rather shift my perspective to how can I make this time meaningful for Kyle? And then he can take a couple of things away from this that he can actually use. Like I enjoy the challenge, like, okay, cool, let's make this session a challenge. I'm a little bit late. There was traffic. Awesome. Let's see, like, am I a good enough teacher to make this important for him? That's the payback that I get for that time, that I go, okay, yes, how can I make this valuable for Kyle in that minutes? And I got to break that down, you know? So that's the reward, right? And then that kind of experience, when you are in a position where, you know, I go speak somewhere and and there is a financial return, I actually have something to talk about. I got some experience like, oh, well, actually I have worked with people and it turns out if you have 7 minutes, you can actually make somebody really, really warm and prepped, right? And, you know, I've worked with somebody who is, you know, I did a little session with a guy who was a UFC fighter. He's like, man, I feel super loose, right? So now I have this metric that I can actually, like, actually have something to talk about if I go talk, you know? So it's not just, I think people get so into the nitty gritty of like, you know, X dollar a minute, you know, and they just want to see that
exchange exactly what
Yeah.
I'm worth. I value my time, all that shit.
maybe it's not so tangible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's differences among that. I've found that too. Like there's certainly, like when I was fighting in the UFC, making shit money, I would train people, you know, and then ultimately, like you're talking about in massage, it's not what you do for them in the hour that matters. It's what they do the other 23, you know, and if you want to see change, so most like in between every fucking set, I'm talking about diet, nutrition, sleep, all the other factors that probably weigh in far more than the hour they spend with me. Right. So there is that give that doesn't have to be there, you know, but
Right.
it's necessary if you actually give a shit.
Totally. And
But let's jump in. Let's jump into this art of breath because we're mowing through this thing.
okay.
And really, you know, I had a chance just to back up on one of the reasons I was like so adamant about having you guys here was I got a chance to meet Brian McKenzie at XPT with Gabby Reese, Laird Hamilton, Dr. Kelly Starrett hooked that up. Huge fucking thank you to Kelly. And it was an amazing experience. And I had done the 10-week Wim Hof training course, but to go in there and to feel all the different types of breath work, you know, like we were doing, and Dr. Andy Galpin was sitting right next to me. I was telling you that we did like a 5-minute super deep meditative breath work. And dude starts like full on body shakes, like he's going deep. And I'm like, is he breathing different air than me? Like, what the fuck? I want that experience.
Move over.
I want to leave my body. Is there a vortex where he's laying? Like, what's going on? But ultimately, it was my first exposure to different modalities of breath work. And of course, I've done breath of fire in yoga. You feel it. Doing Wim Hof, you feel it. And then when I was driving up to interview Greenfield, I heard him podcast with the writer of Oxygen Advantage. So immediately downloaded that on Audible and listened to that entire book because it was 1,000 miles each direction.
Ooh.
Fantastic book, right? Absolutely fantastic. And you mentioned all these people that have influenced Art of Breath, and who was the Russian guy?
Konstantin Bucheko.
Bucheko, yeah. And so like there's all these names and you hear about all these different methods, and it's funny because as with religion or a personal diet, there's this dogma and identity attached to like, this is the way. No, this is the way. And as I've said 100 times, there's many paths up the mountain, right? And all these things have application in different areas. So what you guys have really broken down is a systemic approach to how you breathe, how you open the body first thing in the morning so you get the most out of your breathing, and then how you charge the body, how to reset the body after workout, how to breathe in between sets. Like it's so fucking in depth on every little way you can adapt a different form of breath work and when it's used best.
Yeah.
So it's really, the most comprehensive breath. I really encourage people to check out Power Speed Endurance.
Yeah.
And there's a breath section there.
Totally. Yeah. If you go to powerspeedendurance.com/art of breath, it's
a fucking game changer. It really is. And if you can make it to a seminar, you guys are traveling all over the place, right?
Yeah. So next month we're in Europe. So we're going to be in Florence, Italy, April 21st. And then we have 2 dates in London at CrossFit Perpetua, 28th and 29th of April, which I'm stoked because I've never been to London. And it's like, I've been wanting to go to that city forever. Man,
a lot of gluten in that city.
I'm going to eat it all. No, it's
beef Wellington and fucking.
You want to know what a nerd I am? So I got back into martial arts in the last year, and I'm like, one of the things I'm most excited about is going to Hodger Gracie's and getting a session in.
Hell yeah.
I already emailed them. I'm like, hey, what is it? What do I need to do? They're just like, just come in.
That's
my friend.
awesome.
Hey, my friend, just come in.
That's awesome. Yeah, I fought in Nottingham in 2012 and had my face crushed in, and I have a gluten intolerance. So I was planning on throwing caution to the wind and just eating bad and drinking warm beer and doing the whole London thing after. And because of the head pressure from a orbital blowout, you can't fly sometimes. And they're like, look, we think you'll be okay to fly. We're going to give you a anti-inflammatory so you can actually fly home rather than wait a month or two for this thing to go down. And but I couldn't eat fucking gluten or drink beer. So I was like,
that sucks.
I'm walking around 3 days in London after the fight in Nottingham, and I'm like, fuck. We're gonna do all the sightseeing. We went to Big Ben, we did the London Eye, we did all that shit. And I was like, man, the experience is really to enjoy the local flavor, So I felt like I was robbed. I gotta have some more.
Gotta go back.
I gotta go back.
Back, man.
For sure. So you guys are traveling everywhere. You have it set up to where it's scalable now. And truly, I encourage people to make it to an Art of Breath seminar because it's, you can learn a lot from the online program. There's no doubt, but being immersed in it where you are actually walked through each step changes it, especially when you have people there. Like some of your guys were walking around when I was doing some of the mobility stuff. And, just like with the tennis ball on the back, as you're breathing through, hugging yourself, and then to open up the thoracic and get those upper ribs to really move. Hey, they'd come by and just, whisper in my ear, go ahead, roll around on that, move side to side.
Make a little adjustment.
Yeah, make a little adjustment. And it was like, oh shit, that's where there's pain. And then breathe through the pain. And then all of a sudden it releases, figuring out where are the tight spots that I can open up the body.
Yeah. And you start to figure out, it's the nuance, right? So you can go through the online. So we have some online programs that are really great, that focus on the fundamental aspects like breathing mechanics, nasal breathing development. We have an energy system control program coming out soon. But to go to a course, one, you can hear from someone directly the fluidity of the concepts, which I think is really important to connect the concepts, because what we tend to do is sort of like think, okay, well, over here is my performance for sports, and then over here is this one that does some stuff for my mobility, and really to be able to connect those concepts and see how fluidly they affect one another is a powerful thing, because then it doesn't seem like I have to have 5 practices.
Yeah, they're not all separate.
Yeah, you realize it's one practice and they're all coming from you. And then you can kind of pick the tools as you see fit throughout the day, which ones affect me most right now, and sort of boil those down into things that I'm going to use right away. But I think one of the most important takeaways overall from the concept, from the course, is the fluidity of the connection between the concepts. So like we talk about state, mechanics, and physiology, right? So the ability to control your mindset by grabbing hold of your physiology, right? Being able to actually, instead of using something that seems sort of ethereal, like ethereal ideas, like, for example, if you say to somebody like, hey man, focus, that doesn't, like, does that really work, right? But if you give someone a parameter of breathing that requires focus, you know, like in a warm up and you're trying to get an athlete to focus, or you yourself are trying to get to focus, if you're just like thinking to yourself, like, focus harder, I got to really get into this, it can be tough. But if you create a parameter, like, I'm only going to breathe through my nose through these sort of graduated movement patterns, it requires focus by nature. So I can actually use my breath to grab a hold of my mind in a very tangible way because of how it affects my brain, right? And then the mechanics part is, it's all about movement, position, posture, right? One affects the other. If I can't fully access my breath, then I can't use my breath to control my state, and it's going to affect the way that my mindset is working. The physiology is the same, right? If my mechanics aren't in a good position, then my physiology can't be fully expressed because I'm not taking full breaths. If I'm not taking full breaths, that affects my state. If I'm in a performance scenario, we can see how that loop can start to connect, but it goes the other way too. I start to take better breaths. I'm controlling the rhythm of my breathing in reference to what I'm doing. That's going to affect my mind, as a direct relationship with my brain. So we start to see this fluidity between the different concepts. Whereas I think a lot of times people think they're sort of disparate ideas. Like, I do one thing for relaxing and controlling my mindfulness, and then there's this other thing that only applies to my performance. But they're all you. They're all part of the human experience. And what we try to do is, and like some of the big names that you mentioned before, Buchieko, Wim Hof, Patrick McKeown, who's the author of Oxygen Advantage, we tried to take the codify or distill, right, the concepts from their work and make it accessible into these sort of simple categories. You know, so if you read the Oxygen Advantage, it's pretty dense with physiology. And me personally, I'm a nerd, so I
geeked the fuck out.
I love it. I really appreciate the explanation of the aerobic system and how it truly works and how to actually access it. But most people don't give a shit. They just want to do the thing better. And so you can go, okay, well, here's the basic idea. If you're not within these sort of guidelines, you're not actually accessing the aerobic system, right? And they go, oh man, okay, well, guess what? If you're at an aerobic deficit, what's going to happen sooner? When you do that, how does that make you think? When somebody's standing around going, does it seem like they're ready to perform well again? Of course not. That's an intuitive concept. So then people go, oh man, if I'm not controlling my breathing, that's going to create a different conversation in my own mind when I'm in the midst of performance. So when a situation gets tough, like for example, we're talking about jiu-jitsu, when you're in a tough spot, well, not only is that keeping me from being energetically efficient, that's a signal to my brain, panic. That's a signal, like somebody who's breathing like that, they're calm, right? And not only is it affecting you, but your partner or your competition, they can hear that. Like someone sees you over on the side, shaking it out and breathing slow. That doesn't look like somebody who's scared.
Yeah, that dude's game.
So, okay, well now I can make myself game, right? I have control over that mechanism. So, yeah, that's the idea with the art of breath, is sort of to take like this concept over here and this one over here and this one over here and boil it down. into the very simplest. And really, what you experienced yesterday represents like the 101. Like this is brass tacks. If you only want to learn the very basics, this is it. But there's so many different places that you can take it. And some of the more advanced work that we did today is sort of a window into some of that work, like being able to control what energy system you're in.
Yeah, shifting gears.
Shifting
and
gears.
that'll be made available to the public at some point, right?
Very soon. The next couple of weeks, it'll be out.
This will probably come out, I'm guessing, in late April or early May.
Okay, awesome.
Even at that. So, with that, I think we'll have the stuff we're talking about available.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah. Definitely. Awesome. Definitely by then for sure. It was kind of funny because, so this isn't really a concept, this energy system control, these gears it's a new thing. And I have I kind of feel bad for like the few guys that I've been working with, because it would be like, yeah, it'll be ready by Tuesday. And then Tuesday would come and be like, hey, is it done? I'd be like, nope. And I mean, I've shot something in the order of like 40 or 50 videos for this. And then we're going to do an accompanying webinar as well. And so that's a lot of work, and it's all original content to us, so we're not like, oh, and for this part, go look at so-and-so. Like this is original to our team. So that creates a lot of work, and there's a lot of problems that you have to think through. And then some come up that you could not anticipate. I'm sure you guys are innovators in the market. That happens when you're trying to innovate something. You run into a problem that has never been seen before, and you go, oh man, that doesn't work at all. I guess we have to push the date for this, because this has to, if we want to stay to the quality that we're comfortable with and that people are accustomed to, they're going to have to wait. Right. And so, but I feel like my team is like, hey man, you said Tuesday. I was like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, no, everybody's super cool though. They're like, cool. They're super supportive and helpful. And I'm kind of new to creating video content, so everything takes like 90 takes. So it's a little slow for me.
Yeah. Well, good stuff takes time,
It does.
So it's definitely worth the wait. Just a little teaser that I got today is something that I'll implement on a daily. And it's funny because, you brought up this concept of stress management. You're in an argument with your wife or your boss, and there's different breath work that we can do to shift our, all breath work shifts neurochemistry, and we can upregulate, downregulate, but there's a dramatic impact on the body, and so what are the modes, what are the different areas and avenues that we can take our breath work to shift ourselves in the direction we want to go. And it's funny because we did this gear shift this morning, and so no argument with my wife this morning, but we got a 3-year-old who's been a handful since she's been out of town. He likes to let us know that that's unacceptable behavior to leave for a few days, even if it's for work. And so, dealing with a sick and tired and angry 3-year-old all morning. I had 1 cup of coffee, and I normally drink 2. I had 1 cup, and I felt jacked to the gills. And I was like, my second cup dumped over on the floor while I was trying to put the lid on. And I was like, is that an accident or is that on purpose? Like, I'm not having a fucking second cup.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm fucking good. And then we came in, and obviously there's a shift when I leave that situation of being a dad where it's, full court press to, hey, I'm in work. This is a safe place. I get to meditate here. I get to work out. I get to have awesome podcasts. I get to research cool new supplements and shit like that. So there was a frame change in my mental state, but getting with you and going through that, like there was a fucking palpable difference in how I felt. And it was cool because my mind shifted to a place of wakefulness and my heart rate dropped. There was no panic. So it was like this 2-for-1 of I've elevated my brain cognitively and I've allowed my body internally to rest. There is no fight or flight anymore.
Right.
It was dope.
That's what we call
fucking incredible.
Yeah. So that's calm and alert, right? That's an ideal state of mind to be in, calm but alert. It's like, have you ever watched Dog Whisperer, National Geographic, Cesar Millan stuff, right? Yeah. So what does he talk about? The pack leader, right? Calm and assertive. Right. But calm is always part of it. So like my level of reactivity to environmental stimuli is decreased. If I'm alert, then I'm still aware of what's happening in my environment. You don't want to be drowsy. You want to be calm and drowsy. Right. So these are actually some of the measurable states that we've been working with on identifying through the work in Huberman Lab in Stanford. And so there's like calm and alert is like the ideal state. When you get closer and closer, higher and higher levels of peak arousal, that's like panic. And on the far end is like coma and death on the other side when you're too low, right? So in between there is like calm but drowsy. Like, oh man, I'm so tired. I don't want to do anything. Well, we don't want to be panicked and you don't want to be drowsy, especially in your workplace, right? And you don't want to be, if something doesn't go exactly as planned, you don't want to become agitated, not only because of the social ramifications that could potentially come from that, but also it doesn't help create strong solutions to problems that will inevitably arise, right? But calm and alert helps me foresee and deal with environmental stimuli, but with my best cognitive abilities available. And the reality is that our chemistry and especially our breath, they're managing the physiological components of that all the time, just below our conscious level of awareness. And the idea, one of the analogies that I use a lot is going from automatic transmission to manual transmission, right? And basically deciding like, wait a second, I can grab a hold of these gears and make some decisions and change my behavior right now in a way that's, like you said, really palpable. And the time we spent together, I mean, that wasn't even 10 minutes of actual doing things, right? Because there was some instruction and stuff in there. So it was less than 10 minutes of your life. You moved around and breathed in a certain way. And then we came in here to do the podcast. And, so that's the idea is it doesn't take a lot of time, the more precise you are. But that's why it's important to have labels and language, because it makes it easier for me to communicate with you, right? If I didn't have a lexicon around that, it'd be hard for us to communicate about it. And I think that's one of the other things with the art of breath that we've really tried to do is create a language around a lot of these sort of ethereal concepts and make it easy to talk about. So instead of me just saying, okay, nasal only, that can be kind of hard to wrap your head around. But I say, okay, well, this is what first gear means. Well, then now from now on, now you know what first gear is. You had some intuitive sense of it before, but now your mind has a label to give that sort of spectrum of feeling. And so when you're doing things, you can go, oh man, I don't want to be in fourth gear right now because what I'm doing doesn't match fourth gear. Man, I'm trying to chase my kid. Actually, I don't want to be in fourth gear. I want to stay calm. And you can downshift yourself, right? And but I have some sense of what that is. And once you give your brain a label, it's easier for it to start making connections and linking it up. So,
hey, you create a roadmap that's easier to navigate.
Exactly.
It's like you only need GPS for so long, and then you memorize the route back.
Yeah,
it's much easier to get there.
Exactly. Well, and now you can take a different part of the sort of a different slice of that pie of consciousness and devote it to the task, right? So it's just like if you're driving, when you're going somewhere new, you're really focused on getting to the place. But you live here and you drive back and forth to Onnit all the time. Like you said, you're listening to books, and now you're optimizing your time usage because you don't have to focus so much on the particulars. So once you understand something like the gear structure of breathing, okay, well now once the gears are a part of the way that I operate, now I can shift my attention onto a different, developing a different skill mechanism. But I think because breath is such a fundamental component of the way that we operate in so many ways, it's amazing to me that no one has systematized the instruction of it in this way prior to now. I mean, there's some.
Truly, it's been used for thousands of years in many, many cultures.
Yeah. And there's some systematization around, like yoga, they have practices, but not in terms of like mechanic, like this is step one, and this step one applies in these different environments, especially in performance environments. I think there's a lack of teaching an athlete specifically, or somebody who's interested in human performance, how to optimize that output with different breath patterns. And yoga definitely probably has the deepest tradition around teaching breath work. It's hard to say what though in the United States because it's been diluted quite a bit.
Yeah, and most of that is focused on meditative practices or in opening up the body in yoga and different, and those are all fucking super important.
They're great. I love it.
That isn't necessarily translating over to what you do in a fight or what you do as you warm up for jiu-jitsu or what you do in between sets, crushing it on a ski erg or on an airdyne.
Yeah.
You know, how can I recover the fastest, right? Systematically going through different breathwork protocols to downregulate my heart rate, bring me back to a place where I can stay consistent on that. So each round, my numbers don't see this giant drop off.
Yeah. And, you know, here's the thing. It's like, so I have a pretty strong yoga. You know, I did yoga all through college, and then I basically took 6 years off of strength
just to
training.
get a piece of ass.
Okay, so
you say that so embarrassingly at the conference or at the seminar. You know, I had some ulterior motives. Like every dude in that class who took yoga in college was taking that
it was
PE
like,
course just to look at the hot chicks.
Yeah,
myself included. Like you should have just asked people to raise their hands, and if there was an honest group there, they all would have gone up.
They would have raised their hand. Well, yeah. So that's the deal, right? I was 19, and I was like, hey, I need a PE credit at the university, and there was pretty girls in yoga.
Yeah.
And I was walking by the gym and I was like, okay, yoga, got it. You know, and then I went and I had an amazing instructor, and her first name is Penny, and I feel terrible because I can't remember her last name anymore. But she's an old school Iyengar instructor, and I just ended up getting really steeped in the practice over the course of the next few years. And I had some instructors who had studied in India, and I learned a lot about position, movement, and breath through that exploration. But then I would always wonder, like, okay, well, there's some system here, but what about when I'm not relaxed? You know, so I would try things when I had some things I would try when I was surfing or kayaking or whatever. And this was all sort of a subconscious process, but you know, now it comes out to like, okay, well, what happens in real time? There's a threatening stimulation, or what if it's just an environment that requires a higher level of arousal than a relaxing yoga practice? I have to be able to cross that bridge. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to have two different systems. I want to have one that includes both. And that's the idea is, okay, well now, then that requires a better distillation of the concepts so that now somebody who's doing art of breath, they can go, oh, this is like this, they start to see, okay, well, I can use this if I am in my yoga practice, or I can use it in a performance environment. It crosses the bridge because the concepts have become boiled down for them.
Mm. Hell yeah, brother. Well, shit, man. We did it.
Did we cook?
We did it.
Yeah, I could run off at the mouth for a while.
Where can people find you and mention websites and all that good stuff over again? We'll link to this in the show notes, but where are you at on social media?
For sure. So the website, the easiest website is powerspeedendurance.com/art of breath. That has all the information about upcoming seminars, programs that we have, all that jazz. You can find me on Instagram at prepare to perform. And then also at powerspeedendurance. And of course, Brian McKenzie is at I Am Unscared, and he's putting out awesome content all the time as well.
Yeah, great stuff.
So yeah, those are the easiest channels to find us.
Awesome, brother.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, brother. We'll have you back.
Awesome. Thank you.